I always knew Luke was different. Not just because he was my son, but because we understood each other in ways most parents and children didn't. I had him young, too young, some would say, but that meant we grew up together. I was only 19 when he was born, and now at 37 the gap between us didn't feel as wide as it might have for other mothers and sons. Maybe that was why we could talk the way we did, exchanging easy banter over breakfast or dissecting the world's problems late into the night. Maybe that was why I found myself smiling as I heard the unmistakable hum of his new motorcycle roaring into the driveway. I stepped onto the porch, still in my scrubs, my fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. Luke cut the engine and swung a leg off the bike, his helmet under one arm, his blonde hair tousled from the ride. "How was it?" I called out. His face broke into that boyish grin, the one that reminded me so much of the little kid he used to be, chasing fireflies in our backyard. "Amazing." "You have no idea, Mom." "Oh, but I did." "You went too fast, didn't you?" I narrowed my eyes playfully as he strode up the steps. "Maybe," he admitted, brushing past me and stealing my coffee for a sip. I sighed, shaking my head. "Luke." "I was careful," he said before I could launch into my usual half-hearted scolding. "I swear." He wasn't lying. Luke wasn't reckless, not really. He had always been the kind of kid who tested the limits just enough to feel the thrill but never enough to push past the point of no return. Till I couldn't help but worry. "You know," I said, nudging his shoulder as we stepped inside, "I think I might want to try riding one of those things myself." Luke paused mid-step, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "Wait, seriously?" I shrugged, playing it off, but the truth was I'd been thinking about it ever since I bought him that bike for his birthday. The way he talked about it, the way his face lit up, it reminded me of the way I used to feel about things before life got in the way. "Why not?" I said, setting my coffee down. "I used to love speed too, you know." Luke scoffed. "Sure, Mom." "I'm serious," I shot back, crossing my arms. He studied me for a moment, his head tilting slightly. "Okay. Then let me teach you." I laughed. "You? Teaching me? Oh, that's rich." "Hey," he smirked, "I learned from the best YouTube videos out there. I think I can handle teaching my own mother." I rolled my eyes but felt something stir inside me, excitement, anticipation. "Fine," I said, grabbing the helmet off the counter where he had tossed it. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." Luke's grin widened, and I could see the gears turning in his head. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "Tomorrow. I'll take you out and we'll start with the basics." "Tomorrow," I echoed. "Not even gonna ease me into it?" "Nope," he said smugly. "We're jumping right in." I shook my head, laughing, but I couldn't deny the way my heart kicked up a notch at the idea. Maybe it was reckless, maybe it was ridiculous, but for once I wanted to say yes to something before I talked myself out of it. The next morning, Luke was already outside, straddling his bike like he belonged to it. The mayor, Mr. Donovan, stood nearby, arms folded, chatting with some of the guys from around the neighborhood. Luke's bike had drawn attention since the day I bought it for him, and in a town like ours, people notice things. The mayor, a man with a fondness for speed himself, had made a point of stopping Luke last week to tell him, "It's good to see someone appreciate the rush." Today was no different. Mr. Donovan gave Luke a knowing nod as I stepped outside. "You teaching your mom today?" Luke's grin was full of pride. "Yep." "She's finally giving in." The mayor let out a satisfied chuckle. "Good. Everyone should know what it feels like to fly." I smirked at that but said nothing. I wasn't sure I wanted to fly, just maybe get both feet off the ground for a little while. Luke held out a helmet for me, and I took it hesitantly. "You're really serious about this, huh?" "You have no idea," he said, his voice softer now. I didn't quite understand why he was so eager to teach me. It wasn't just about the bike. There was something else there, something unspoken. Luke had always been proud of me in a way that was different from how kids usually saw their parents. Maybe because we had grown up together, because I wasn't like the other moms in town. I looked young, and not just young, I looked like I belonged next to him, not as his mother, but as someone who fit into his world. I saw it in the way he smirked when his friends stared at me a second too long. In the way he bragged about me like I was some kind of trophy instead of just the woman who had raised him. He loved showing me off, not because I was his mom, but because I didn't look like his mom. I was his friend, his partner in crime, his proof that he had something other people didn't. I didn't know if that was a good thing or not. "All right," I said, fastening the helmet under my chin. "Let's do this." Luke clapped his hands together, stepping aside so I could straddle the bike. "Now, first things first." I didn't let him finish. I kicked the bike into gear, twisting the throttle the way I had seen him do 100 times. The engine roared beneath me, and I felt the thrill of it vibrate through my bones. Luke let out a startled laugh. "Mom!" I grinned, feeling something wild and reckless settle in my chest. "What?" I thought we were jumping right in. Luke stared at me, his eyes wide with something between admiration and disbelief. "You," he said, shaking his head, "are way cooler than anyone thinks." And then I took off, leaving him standing there, watching me fly. I felt the wind tear through my hair as I rode, the vibration of the bike rumbling through my chest, setting something alive in me that had been dormant for years. The street blurred at the edges, and for the first time in a long while I let go of control. I let the speed take me. I let myself be weightless. Luke was shouting something behind me, but I couldn't make out his words over the roar of the engine. When I finally slowed down and brought the bike to a stop at the end of the road, I glanced over my shoulder at him. His expression was a mix of shock and pure exhilaration. "Okay," he panted, running a hand through his hair. "You definitely don't need me to teach you." I smirked. "Told you I was made for this." Luke laughed, shaking his head. "All right then," he said, hopping off the bike. "Take me for a ride." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You trust me now?" "Not even a little," he said with a grin, swinging his leg over the seat behind me. "But I'm willing to risk it." The weight of him settled against my back, his arms wrapping securely around my waist. It was a familiar hold, one he used to do as a kid when he would climb into my lap, back when his little arms barely made it around me. But now his grip was strong, firm. His chin rested lightly against my shoulder, and I felt the warmth of him through my jacket. "Hold on," I said, twisting the throttle. The bike shot forward, faster than even I expected, and Luke let out a surprised whoop. "Whoa, Mom!" I laughed, the sound of it getting lost in the rush of the wind as we tore down the road. My pulse raced, my heart hammered. I could feel Luke's breath against my ear, could feel his grip tighten every time I took a turn a little too sharply. But neither of us told the other to slow down. We loved it. When I finally pulled the bike to a stop, we were both breathless, high on the speed, the freedom, the sheer recklessness of it. Luke climbed off, shaking his head in amazement. "You're coming with me to the biker meet next weekend, Mom," he declared. I laughed, shoving my helmet off and shaking out my hair. "Oh yeah." "I'm not kidding," he said, dead serious. "You belong there. You ride like you've been doing this your whole life." I smirked, stretching my arms above my head. "They won't be able to resist me." Luke let out a sharp, knowing laugh. "Oh, they're gonna swoon at the sight of you. And when they see you on a bike." He whistled low. "They'll be all over you." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, please." "You don't get it, Mom," he said, shaking his head. "You don't look like someone's mom at all. You look like one of us. Like someone you'd see on the back of a Harley, walking into a bar like she owns the place." Something about the way he said it made my stomach flutter. The week went on as usual. I worked at the clinic, Luke went about his days, but there was something different. Something small, something barely noticeable, except that I noticed it. Luke started kissing me more often. Not in a way that anyone would question. It was innocent. quick kiss on my cheek before heading out. A brief brush of his lips on my forehead when I was sitting on the couch reading. A lingering press of his mouth against the back of my neck when I was at the sink, washing dishes. First, I thought I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into things. But then I started to feel it too. There was a heat between us, something charged, something unspoken. It was in the way his eyes lingered on me longer than they used to. The way his hands would rest on my shoulders, his fingers pressing just a little deeper than necessary. The way my own breath hitched when he leaned too close. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. But deep down I knew. Something was changing. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. The entire week had passed in a blur, but there was an undeniable shift between Luke and me, something unspoken humming beneath the surface of our usual routine. We didn't talk about it, but we felt it. And now, as I threw my leg over my new bike, the one Luke had proudly picked out for me earlier this week, I felt that same rush return. Luke revved his engine beside me, a gleam of excitement in his eyes. "You ready to show them what you've got?" I smirked, adjusting my gloves. "Oh, they're not ready for me." He laughed, shaking his head, but there was something else there, something softer. "That's what I'm afraid of." And with that, we tore off down the road. The ride to the meet was exhilarating. I had driven before, of course, but not like this. Not with the knowledge that I wasn't just someone's mother, someone's caretaker. I was me. I was alive, the wind roaring past me, my pulse racing in sync with the growl of the engine beneath me. When we pulled up to the lot, dozens of motorcycles were already lined up, gleaming under the afternoon sun. The air smelled of fuel, leather, and the faintest trace of beer and cigarettes. People stood in clusters, leaning against bikes, laughing loudly, sharing stories of past rides and near misses. The moment we arrived, all eyes turned toward us. Or rather, toward me. I could feel the weight of their gazes as I swung my leg off the bike, pulling off my helmet and shaking my hair free. I had dressed for the occasion. Dark jeans, fitted leather jacket, boots that clicked softly against the pavement. Luke grinned, clearly loving every second of it. "Yo, Luke, who's the girl?" one of the guys called out, stepping forward with a smirk. Luke slung an arm around my shoulders casually. "This," he grinned. "This is Mary." The guy nodded in approval. "Nice. Didn't know you had a girlfriend, man." Before I could even correct him, I felt Luke tense beside me, just for a split second, just enough for me to notice. And then, with a chuckle, he said, "I'm flattered." The group burst into laughter, and I forced a laugh as well, though something twisted in my stomach. I should have corrected them. I should have laughed it off properly, made it clear. But I didn't. 'Cause for some reason the idea of being seen like this, of being wanted, admired, sent a thrill through me that I wasn't ready to name. We spent the next few hours at the meet, drinking soda from glass bottles, listening to stories of cross-country rides, and admiring each other's bikes. The more Luke introduced me to his friends, the more surprised they were. "This is your mom?" one guy blurted out, eyes wide. Luke just grinned. "Yep." "No way." "No freaking way," another guy muttered, shaking his head. "Dude, she's cooler than you." Luke laughed. "Tell me something I don't know." I playfully shoved his shoulder, but his arm stayed wrapped around me, lingering just a bit longer than it needed to. As the night wore on, the comments kept coming, light-hearted but persistent. "You two could totally pass as a couple." "Man, Luke, you lucked out." "If I had a girl like that, I'd never let her out of my sight." "You sure she's really your mom?" The jokes were harmless, but each time my stomach twisted just a little more. Then, as we were sitting on a worn-out leather couch near the bonfire, Luke leaned in close, his voice just for me. "What if we just pretend?" I turned to him, startled. "What?" "Just for tonight," he said, eyes twinkling mischievously. "They already think it. Let's mess with them a little." I should have said no. I should have shut it down. But instead, I found myself smiling. "All right. Just for fun." And so we played along. We sat close, his arms slung lazily around my waist, fingers drumming lightly against my hip. We giggled at the jokes thrown our way, leaning into each other in ways that felt too natural, too easy. And I realized something that sent a shiver down my spine. I liked it. I liked the warmth of him against me, the way his laugh rumbled through his chest, the way he looked at me, not as his mother, not as someone who had raised him, but as someone he admired. As someone he wanted to be around. It was harmless, just a game, just a joke. That's what I told myself. The night had cooled by the time we left the meet, the roads dark and empty, just us and the hum of our engines. Luke was unusually quiet as we pulled into the driveway. Climbed off my bike, stretching. "That was fun," I said lightly, unzipping my jacket. Luke didn't say anything at first. He was looking at me, his face unreadable. Then, without warning, he scooped me up into his arms. "Luke," I yelped, laughing as he carried me up the porch steps. "You're tired," he said simply. "You've had a long day." I rolled my eyes, still chuckling. "I can walk, you know." "Yeah, but where's the fun in that?" He carried me all the way up to my bedroom, setting me down on the bed like I weighed nothing. "All right, you happy now?" I teased. Luke just smiled, sitting down beside me. "Not yet." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you've gotta relax," he said, his voice quieter now. "You're always taking care of everyone else. Let me take care of you." I didn't have the strength to argue. Luke's hands were gentle as he massaged my shoulders, his fingers kneading into the tension I hadn't even realized I was holding. "That feels nice," I murmured, letting my eyes close. "Yeah," he said softly, his thumbs working over the base of my neck. "You deserve it." There was something soothing about it, something I didn't want to end. I sighed, letting myself sink into the warmth of his touch. Then, before I even realized what I was doing, I turned my head, just slightly. Just enough that when my eyes opened, we were closer than I expected. Close enough that I could see the way his breath hitched. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. For a split second, everything stilled. Then, without thinking, I leaned in. Luke caught my face in his hands, his thumb grazing my cheek. His breath was warm against my lips. But before I could pull away, before I could process what was happening, he kissed me. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't unsure. It was deep, slow, consuming. When he pulled back, his voice was barely a whisper. "I like you," he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "Not as a mom." The words sent a shock through me, down to my core. I should have pulled away. I should have said something. But I didn't. 'Cause in that moment, all I could feel was the heat between us. The weight of something that had been building for far too long. Something neither of us were ready to name. And I knew nothing would ever be the same again. They tried to forget. Tried to pretend it hadn't happened. That first moment, that first spark, the way their breaths had tangled in the quiet of the room, it should have been a mistake. Should have been easy to push away, to bury under routine, to chalk up to exhaustion or blurred emotions. But it wasn't. Because once a line has been crossed, there's no going back. And so it kept happening. A lingering touch. A glance that held too much weight. Kiss, hesitant at first, then inevitable. Neither of them spoke about it, yet neither of them could stop it. Maybe someone would judge them if they knew. Maybe people would whisper, would call it something ugly, something forbidden. But in the silence between them, in the way their hands found each other, in the way they felt more themselves than they ever had before, maybe this was the purest love of all. Maybe it wasn't wrong. Maybe it was just them. And maybe, just maybe, only time would tell.